morning, everyone. My name is Dean Brouder. I'm the Drug and Alcohol Resource Coordinator for Methuen Public Schools. Welcome. I have a very special guest this morning who's going to talk about a new initiative that has come through, one of the two major initiatives that have come through Methuen Public Schools as we move towards a more holistic approach to our students. So he's going to give us some information about himself and his experience. We go back to his very first day of teaching at Methuen High, and without a doubt, he's one of the finest young teachers, touted as a leader of the future, and I'm not just saying that because he's next to me. I believe that in my heart, and he's a wonderful addition to Methuen Public Schools, and today we're going to focus on that initiative. Good morning, Jeff. How are you today?
Good morning, Dean. How are you?
Very well, very well. So give us a little background on how did Jeff B. end up at Methuen Public Schools?
At Methuen Public Schools. Well, I graduated from UNH in 2001, not with a degree in teaching and not wanting to teach, and through a year in private industry decided that I was going to jump into education. So I started here in Methuen in the fall of 2002, and the first person I met at Methuen High School was you.
That's right.
You were my mentor in the English department, and I still tell kids to this day that everything they see in the classroom from me in some way derived from what I learned from you in the first few years here. So this is now my 15th year teaching English in Methuen High School.
Oh,
15.
My God.
Yeah. Young
That's
teacher.
Wonderful, yeah. Wow. That's amazing. What I always, would impress upon new teachers, and I always saw it in you, I didn't see it in too many people, when they initially come here, they're afraid to make mistakes. And you were someone who wasn't afraid, not that you made that many, but that you always wanted to improve your craft. And I think this PBIS has a lot to do with, honing your skills as a teacher. And what role do you play in the relationship between the system, I'm the teacher, you're the student, and how collectively do we come together and form a healthy community where we're looking at all of the child, not just the intellect.
That's correct. I think what PBIS really does is, which is our new initiative, PBIS, it talks about educating the whole child, not just the academic piece of it. And it makes a lot of what teachers have done implicitly for so long become explicit. And I go back to, there are two things that I remember you said to me in my first year teaching, which is kind of the foundation of PBIS. You said two things to me. You said, humans first. Humans first, teacher-student relationship comes second. Recognize that we're all human beings first, and I still use that on the first day of school. I talk about that every single year, and that gets into a little bit of the PBIS approach that we'll talk about later. And the idea of, you told me to think about the way you think. And I think that idea of thinking about the way you think naturally lends itself to a constant cycle of improvement, a constant cycle of innovation, and a constant cycle of, well, just because you've done it this way for 5 years, you don't have to keep doing it like that. There might be a better way or a new way, or keep evolving instead of becoming stagnant. And I think two of those ideas match up very well with the PBIS initiative.
So you have like two traditional bodies. You have the traditional student who is used to a certain teacher teaching a certain way, regardless of the subject. You have a staff who could be here for 1 year or 15 or 30 teaching a certain way, and now you have the two bodies coming together and saying, wait a minute, let's take a look at the way we interact. Let's take a look at what happens when we have a slight confrontation in the hallway, or some difference of opinion when it comes to analyzing a poem. First of all, what is PBIS for the common man, and why is it so important now?
Of course. So PBIS stands for Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, which is a very fancy way of saying that it's an initiative to look at school culture. How can we improve school culture? How can we focus on student behavior, with the ultimate goal of increasing academic achievement? It's not just a program for behavior and relationships. The goal is to increase academic achievement through working with students in their behavior in school. One of the first quotes that we read as we started to get into this that really made a lot of sense for me and helped some light bulbs go off was the idea that when a student doesn't know how to add or subtract, we teach them the math skills they need. When a student doesn't know how to read, we teach that student how to read. When a student doesn't know geography, we show them the globe and we teach that student geography. But when a student doesn't know how to behave, what do? And traditionally, instead of teaching, we've punished. And that doesn't work. So one of the foundational principles of PBIS is that we need to teach students how to behave. That's part of it. If a student does not know how to behave, that we can still teach that. We can explicitly teach behaviors. And instead of telling students what not to do, don't do these 3 things in my classroom, we very clearly state, these are the expectations. The expectation is you will behave like this. The expectation is that at the beginning of class, this is what we're all going to do as a class. So to really show them and model and discuss that behavior, and it doesn't need to be for an hour, but in context, you'd be surprised what 30 seconds of teaching behavior, instead of just saying, oh, the kid is 16 years old, he should know how to behave.
Well, that's
Okay.
not my job. That should take place at home.
Exactly.
We're taking away from the academic piece. I have a quick question for you where the curriculum, you have time on learning, you have all the pressure of the state. I'm sure this has come up, and they want, the second grade teachers to be covering an X amount of information in math, a new reading program, and pretty much have it uniform across the curriculum, across the school-wide. How does this either support or does this question that modality where everyone should be at a certain place at a certain time?
I think it helps. I think it actually gets you there faster. I think we make a small investment during the day, and it comes up situationally. But like I said, 30 seconds on behavior, a minute on behavior here, and it's something that's done throughout the school too. So the students are seeing this in all their classrooms, not just mine. When we have our advisor-advisee block, we've devoted a half an hour once every couple of weeks to talking about behavior and social emotional health, and all that kind of ties together. And if a student's going to succeed academically in my class, that student needs to feel supported. That student needs to have basic needs met first before we can worry about Shakespeare in my English class. So I think these small investments of time actually yield huge results in terms of getting students even farther along faster.
So it's just not, I think before we were very reactionary.
Yes.
Very, very reactionary. And now we're saying, no. We're not going to give the power to a 15-year-old boy or girl who may or may not come from a troubled family or an unhealthy family. We're going to take the power back as a school system, share it appropriately, but we're still in charge, but in a way where we're more like partners moving collectively toward a common goal instead of I'm up here, you're down here, you'll do what I tell you, and the more you try to question my authority, the more the escalation goes up, the more ISS, Saturday detention, outside school detention, all of these reactionary results leave us with a student who may be failing because of attendance and can dig themselves a hole. I think I see that happening, especially with the at-risk kids.
Yeah,
They'll dig a hole and they can't get out of.
Correct. And you are very right when you say that this is not a reactive approach.
Yeah.
This is very much a proactive approach. And a lot of it is just a mindset for the teacher and for the school culture. And one of the ideas is that behavior is a form of communication. So when a student misbehaves in my class, I try to figure out what's the function of that behavior. Why is that student doing that? Because that student is somehow communicating something. Maybe that student lacks the language or the written skills or the social emotional skills to articulate, this is what I'm feeling, this is what's going on. And sometimes that student needs a little bit of help to be able to communicate that. So instead of just acting out and misbehaving, you ask the student 2 very simple questions. Is everything okay? And is there anything I can do to help? And those 2 questions really often lead to a nice conversation that allows you to understand why the student is misbehaving. And instead of just addressing the misbehavior, you address the root of that problem. And then that student feels comfortable. That student feels validated. And a lot of what I talk to people with this PBIS approach is students need to know 2 things from us. They need to know that we genuinely care about them, and they need to know that we're fair. And if we care and we are fair, then that student is 9 times out of 10 going to be very successful in my classroom. So what we're trying to do then is be proactive. Like you said, instead of reacting to the behavior and punishing and suspending and giving detentions, which statistically speaking doesn't work to change behavior.
No.
So to try to eliminate those behaviors before they happen.
I would see throughout my long career, it didn't happen so much with me because I've had a pretty loud persona, but that young kids oftentimes look at kindness as a weakness. Historically, the shocks would go around if they saw a young male or female not quite sure, the first year, not quite sure where the line is and how to. Classroom management it's a craft, it's a skill that takes time to learn. Now you're giving them the tools to be kind, to draw the line, to be proactive, not buddy-buddy. There's a distinction there.
And I think there's sometimes a misconception that kindness equals I'm a pushover and the kids run the classroom and it's too touchy-feely. And no, there is certainly a way to be kind and firm at the same time. And that's a delicate balance. Like you said, that's a craft and not something that teachers can learn in graduate school. Yeah. You learn by doing. And part of this is to support teachers in that idea as well, that to be kind and respectful and develop relationships with students and develop rapport with students. And when the student, and that way you show the students that you care, and then they care about class, they care about achieving, they care about not disappointing the teacher.
So how do you feel as one of the leaders? I know that you don't do this alone, and each school, each grammar school has its group of people that are in the initial stages taking on leadership roles. How do you feel has been the reaction? Obviously, the people who have volunteered for this must be happy about the direction.
Correct.
They must have been those type of teachers anyway. How do you deal with the pushback or well, I'm a math teacher and I'm not here to teach about feelings and I don't feel quite comfortable going in that direction. What do you say to them?
Well, before we even talk about that, we should talk about any initiative, and sometimes I don't like that. I don't look at this so much as an initiative as a shift in mindset, a cultural change around the school. But we have the support from everybody, from the superintendent to assistant superintendent Dr. Kwong to Principal Barden to John Crocker, the director of guidance. Everybody is on board and working in the same direction. I was at a team training just yesterday, and Principal Barden was there, Mr. Crocker was there. So everyone's been involved in a part of this process, which makes it, which is pretty cool to have the support from the people at the top.
Yeah, when you have that support, you feel empowered, and you just want to spread. You want to spread best practice. You hear that often, but I mean, we needed to do something, and I'm so proud of Methuen for deciding to take, and it's going to take some time.
Correct.
It's going to take some time. Let's use a specific example without breaking anonymity rules, where a young woman came to you, a young student came to you, you had developed a rapport. I'm not even sure she was one of your students. She may have been, I'm not sure. Ran into some problems, some real serious problems last year, but that you developed a relationship with her. You have a relationship with me. Tell the audience what happened.
And so I had a student in class last year, and in the first couple of weeks of school, couple months of school, we didn't necessarily see eye to eye. She was one of my students in class. She was sometimes disengaged. She didn't want to do the work. She missed a few classes in the beginning of the year, maybe leaving school early. And instead of calling home and saying, your daughter skipped my class and she's going to be in trouble, the first time I talked to her mom, it was, I'm concerned. And mom realized that there was a partnership there. And then the student realized, hey, he didn't just try to get me in trouble. He cares about me. He actually wants me to do well. And it didn't happen in the first week. It took a little bit of time, but I developed a relationship with the student in terms of getting her to know that class was a safe place. It was a healthy place. It was a place where it's okay to make mistakes, that no one's going to judge you, but that some real cool learning can take place as well. And she started to see that when she was engaged in class, she was learning and growing, and the grades started to come. She was doing better than she'd done academically before. And then got in some pretty serious trouble and missed a couple of months of school there, but she did all of her work outside the classroom. Yeah. For a student who for months did not set foot in my classroom, we communicated every day through email, and she ended up with one of the highest averages in class. working really hard, but still came back to school and still needed some support. So I introduced her to you, and you started meeting with her in the morning, and brought her to Mr. Shaheen here at the high school, and to do some music production. And what this student has realized is, I've got a group of adults who genuinely care about me.
Yeah, and it's like taking that extra time. Like you had alluded earlier, that if a kid is acting out, there's a reason. Go for the root. This girl is disengaged. This girl doesn't find any reason. She can't connect with anything that's going on in school. Her peer group, a little unhealthy maybe at times, not making the right choices. You bring her to me. She and I develop a relationship. All of a sudden, I find out she has this music skill that literally brought tears to my eyes. And there was something that was valued by an old man, and she actually had tears in her eyes. So it was like an interaction between a student and a teacher through the medium of music. And all of a sudden, I asked her, I said, do we offer anything like this at Methuen High? And I said, let's go up and see Mr. Shaheen, because Dave and I have worked together for 20 years. And
He's the best.
Yeah, and it's not the first time, and he always welcomes in people that don't do so well in the traditional classroom and whatever. And she found a way. Now, tomorrow, she could skip, but we gave her an opportunity. A class was changed. For whatever reason, guidance played a major role. I was extremely impressed with that first year guidance counselor, Eric, and he just made sure that, look, we're going to do this, but you have to understand one thing. Just because you're having a problem in one class, we're not going to give you a benefit, or we're not going to give you a reward for that behavior. We're going to expect you to do A, B, and C, and if you're willing to do A, B, and C, then I'll go along with this change. So it was a real cool exchange between mom, young guidance counselor, old man support system, you, me, Shaheen, for this one girl. And now she's really honing her craft. She knew that tragedy. She knew that boy in Lawrence. She wrote a song just for him. She put it on. She goes to the studios, local studios, and she may or may not have a career as a result of one person touching another person, And I thought that was a cool example of people taking the time that every single student that comes in, because it's really easy to like the ones whose hands are always up, and they deserve credit. But it's not as easy to like an unlikable child,
Correct.
or a child that doesn't fit the mold that we often have confrontations with. So I'm really glad that someone like you, that I respect a great deal, will be representing the school as we move on, because it's changed. John Crocker is changing the way guidance looks at itself, and turning into that mental health initiative, because what's happening on the outside, on the streets, is definitely affecting what the performance on the inside. And what we used to kid about, even though it's a little on the liberal side, but if you get a child's heart, you get the head later. Go for the heart first and then get the head. And then you'll see a blossoming many times. Sometimes, no matter what you do.
And that's what we've seen with the student that we were talking about, that she has the music connection now, and a reason to come to school, and a reason to be here. I've seen her, she's been a different kid the last few weeks. Yeah. She's going to all her other classes too, so it's not, she has music and that's it, but what about math or science or social studies or English? She's going to those classes and she's succeeding in those classes. Her grades were pretty good first quarter, and you get the heart, and then you allow her the opportunity, to be successful in all of her classes without, again, explicitly teaching math. You got the heart, you talked about the behavior, the culture, the mindset, how are we going to approach the student, handle the student, and she's doing very, very well here right now.
Yeah.
I think in large part because of that attitude.
Yeah, and you multiply 1 times whatever, and before you know it, and this is going all the way down to the grammar schools. They understand the word respect, responsibility, consequences. It's not easy to make systemic change, so it takes a lot of courage from central office, and all the policies have to be approved. So kudos to the school committee as well, because change is slow. change is slow in any major system. We're dealing with 7,000 students with parents who have different opinions and ideas about what should be covered, when it should be covered. You have the state mandates. You have a lot of different things
going on. And I was, at first when Mr. Barden asked me to be a part of this program,
Right.
again, we've called it PBIS, where we've kind of rebranded it into this idea of Ranger Pride.
Right.
Pride being patience, respect, integrity, determination, and excellence.
Right.
And it's about having, what does pride look like?
Yeah.
To be proud of your school, proud of your community, proud of your group, and that's a feeling that a lot of students have never had. They've never had a feeling of
No
pride.
connection.
So working with that Ranger Pride idea, when Mr. Barden asked me to do it, I was all in. And then it started to take off, and I'm realizing this is becoming a school-wide, a district-wide, a community-wide endeavor. And I stepped back and I questioned to myself, said, how involved do I want to be? I've seen initiatives come and go. I've seen things come for 6 months, for a year, for 2 years, and they go and people forget about it. But if I was going to some degree, put my reputation out there and put my name out there, attach it to this, I wanted to make sure this was something in which I genuinely believed. And I came to the conclusion that at its core, this approach is about treating students with respect and integrity and positivity and reinforcing what they do positively. In 20 years from now, if this initiative lasts or not, I'm never going to look back at 2015, 16, 17 and say, man, treating kids with respect and reinforcing the positive was the wrong thing to do. I'm never going to say that.
Exactly.
And once I had that realization, then I'm all in with this.
Yeah.
And
you can tell it's 7:30 in the morning and you're pretty excited.
Starting to come alive, right? I had 2 cups of coffee, it helps.
Yeah. And but you have 2 young children, and you have a young wife, and you travel to come back, and yet you're willing to put in time, and it takes time. This doesn't happen overnight. But you're excited so far about the direction. You're seeing change in administrators, and they're under a lot of pressure that people don't realize day in, day out, man.
Absolutely. I've seen it even with Dr. Kwong, the assistant superintendent,
Yeah.
and she's talked to me about how, because we've talked a lot about this, and she's talked to me about how she sometimes approaches staff members differently.
Yes.
When she has interactions with teachers, she's kind of practicing these ideas, that as a classroom teacher, I might practice with a student. Dr. Kwong's doing this throughout everything that she does during the day. So certainly there's a trickle-down effect, and to some degree, maybe that trickle-up effect, if that's even a thing.
Well, not politically, but but I think in the system, I think we're on the right road, and I don't think it's anything new to people who have had a strong sense of what real teaching is.
No, in fact, this is something we've been doing that a lot of teachers, like I said, have done implicitly.
Exactly.
We're just now making it explicit and putting a name to it. And the fact that Mr. Crocker and I have, after school, a bunch of days, run some professional development workshops for teachers around this. And half of this session is providing teachers with different strategies that they could use in the classroom. And when we ask the teachers to talk about that strategy, it's not, well, what could it look like? What could you do? We're asking teachers, what have you done? You've done this. You've used all of these strategies. You just didn't know it had a name.
Right.
But to talk about how you've used it in your classroom, in your school, with our students, and teachers realize, man, this is something I've done. And they share their successes, and it gets other people excited and energized to try out some of these strategies and try out some of these ideas of, generally speaking, being positive with students.
Yeah.
Instead of hammering the negative. And part of that is really hard. If a student makes 100 bad choices in a row, 100 bad decisions, and then that student makes a right decision, what do you do? Because I think sometimes the instinct is to say, well, 100 bad decisions outweigh the one good decision.
Yeah.
But I would say that when that student makes a good decision, reinforce that. Tell that student you're proud of them, that you appreciate that you recognize that you notice that. And that student, 9 times out of 10, is going to want to repeat that behavior and get that recognition again and that praise. And that part has been very, very effective for me. And that's hard as a teacher to come in with that clean slate every day.
And that's it.
And
every
hit reset.
day is a new day. And if a student feels like, because if they think, they can smell it a mile away, that you don't like them, that you have written them off, the hole is too deep, they shut down. And that's another one that we lose. And we don't want to do that. So we're saying, let's take that extra minute or two, day in, day out. Every day is a new day, because we all have bad days, no
Right.
doubt about
Right.
that.
But to never let, if your
Yesterday-
previous interaction with a student was in some way negative, never let that influence the next interaction with that student. And I think there are a lot of misperceptions out there as well. Every Wednesday afternoon, I take a group of students to the Methuen Senior Center.
Right.
I have for the last 15 years as part of the Adopt a Grandparent program. And a comment I've heard for 15 years from the senior citizens in the Methuen community is, it's so nice to see the kids in a different light. All we see is what we see on the news every day. But they get to know the kids, and they realize that at their core, we have so many good kids here. We just need to find a way to tap into that and get that out of the kids and let them kind of blossom and succeed into who they can be. And PBIS, or this Ranger Pride approach, is trying to tap into that part of the kid.
And an example, really, is an offshoot, is Matt Curran coming in and getting his athletes, who we always struggled with trying to get active in the SAD program, with Jackie Rubino, coming together for the first time in many, many years, since Cal Carroll, I think, and do a couple of community activities together. And so you had, we have all these different groups. One isn't better than the other. We have all these opportunities for kids to do positive things that reinforce that whole concept of PBIS. Well, we have to wrap it up. I'm
Right.
really, really proud of the progress you've made over the years. It's been outstanding, and you're a role model for other staff members, and they might give you a dig if they ever do watch the show. But you deserve a lot of credit, because you've honed your craft, and you are what I would consider a master teacher at this point. And you're a credit to Methuen Public Schools, and you're my good friend.
Thank you, Mr. Brouder. I appreciate that more than anything. So.
Absolutely. Well, I think it was very informative, Jeff. I think you're making it clear to the community that there's a major shift in the way we look at things, the way we interact with our students. I think it's going to be a place where people really want to come to. And please make sure that you go to our website and you take a look at all of the work that Kevin Hatch and Dave Shaheen have put together to educate the city of Methuen about the drug and alcohol issue, but also about all the wonderful, positive things that Methuen Public Schools is aware of. Thank you, and hope to see you soon.